welcome to another Friday Masterclass. We're talking about figures again. This is part 4 in the series about common figure drawing mistakes. Drawing figures is complicated. It's one of the most valuable things you can learn to draw. If you can draw the figure well, if you can invent figures from your imagination, and draw them in such a way that they feel like they have life and balance and weight, and like the range of motion is believable and the anatomy looks fairly good. If you can learn to do that, you can pretty much, in my opinion, and a lot of people share this opinion, draw anything. Because the building blocks that go into understanding how to draw figures from the imagination are the same that you can use to draw vehicles, buildings, any object you can imagine, a tube of toothpaste. Also there's something about taking the figure and trying to distill it down to most simple forms. That exercise is something that you then carry forward into other subject matter. Whenever I draw something for the first time, a new thing that I've never drawn, let's say I want to draw like a Mack truck, something I've never drawn. One of the things that figure drawing has helped me to do is to look for the biggest shapes, look for the simplest possible way to represent all that complexity, and then work my way down towards the details after I get the larger proportions of that object worked out, because that's really the easiest way to approach drawing anything. We start out drawing usually by, when we're kids, if we're trying to draw something from observation, we'll start in a corner and we'll just make our way through the entire drawing from that one little point of origin. And what will wind up happening is, most often the proportions are going to be way off. It'll look like 5 or 6 drawings kind of pushed together into one. It's the same subject, but sizes of things will be all wonky. Hands will be too big, legs will be too short, and so on. And the reason for that is we haven't yet learned to look at what we're drawing, if it's a figure in this case, from a bird's eye view, or from a further away, so that we're looking at it all as one thing, and then breaking that one thing down into halves and quarters, and looking at the relative size of things, one thing compared to another. So comparative measuring, which is a fundamental skill to learn in drawing. When you start to understand the proportions better and start to work out those kinds of things, what you wind up doing then is you can make your way into things like working on giving a figure a sense of weight, and then being able to show that figure in motion and be able to exaggerate just a little bit to make that motion more exciting, to make that action, whatever it happens to be, feel more fluid, and so on. So anyway, these are all things that I hope to help you with as we go forward with these lessons. Of course, I'm going to cover lots of other things. This is just the start of this series of classes, and they're going to be running all the way through 2021 as well. But let's jump into drawing. And while I switch over here to my screen, I want to say hello to some folks we have in the chat. Let's see. Oh, nobody's chatting at the moment. Okay, then. That's fine. If you want to be quiet, you don't have to say anything. That's okay. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube and you're going to make any comments there, I'm actually not going to see those comments. I'm looking at the comments right now at behance.net/live. So Behance is the place to go. It's a free account you can set up, and you can leave comments or questions there for me if you like. Alrighty. So what you're looking at here was I was just getting myself warmed up, thinking about one pose drawn at 2 different angles. And what I wanted to show you with this was how I was taking what is normally a very complex thing, the human body, human figure, and trying to sort of look for rhythms and look for these nice curvilinear and these S curves and these C curves to make it have a lot more of a fluid action throughout the pose. Now if I just knock this back for a moment, which I'll do with reducing the opacity here, I want to just come over it with another color and show you what I'm thinking about is things like this. See, that's one nice long line of action from that trapezius back, the trapezius and the shoulder on down through the arm, all the way to the wrist from that. So these different points of articulation, you know, here and here, here, I'm not giving them so much consideration as them being separate areas, or separate areas where things bend, so to speak, early in the drawing. The way something like this starts, this is gesture, is if I'm thinking about a pose, I just do something like that, and I say, okay, here we go. I've got the head here. I know that the head is facing down, so I'm seeing the top of the cranium here, and the facial features all get crunched into this little area here. And then I just think about what's happening is the spine is back there, okay? And it's connecting here to the base of the skull. And there's that line right there. But I can't see that. Well, it's just good to know it's there, though. But then for the legs, too, it's really kind of a nice little 1, 2. See that little area right there? I just give it a little curve and a little change in direction right there at the knee. And then here, 1 and 2, right? And out for that foot. And that's really kind of the essence of the drawing. That's the essence of the pose. It doesn't look like much when I do this, but that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about to try and simplify things for me and make it a little easier to understand. And if you look here at this drawing, it's really just like a solid, strong, directional pull from the foot up through the head, right? Everything's just kind of following. And then the secondary line of action is really here. Okay, that's really pretty much the whole pose. These are the kinds of things I keep in the back of my mind if I'm drawing a figure and I want there to be some action, and try and keep it sort of fluid and have it read nicely. But why don't we just do some figures now? And if anybody's curious about what brush I'm using, this is the Vine Charcoal 1 brush from the Charcoal brush set, which you can get from the brushes download page. Remember to do that. Come up here to a little hamburger menu. This is 4 lines that are stacked on top of one another in the brushes menu. And you go to Get More Brushes, and that'll take you to this magical place where you can download over 1,800 brushes that I've made. And there have been releases every quarter or so. New set here, 20 there, 25 there, ever since 2018. And so lots to play with there. And FYI, the winter brush set just came out this week. For those of you in the United States, it'll be rolled out to the rest of the world over the next 2 or 3 weeks, so look for those as well. Anyway, this is the Vine Charcoal brush, lovely to draw with, and give it a try. If you happen to have Adobe Fresco, the charcoal brushes are already in that app, including in the free version. I'm going to change my eraser, and I'm going to use, let's see here, go to my eraser tool. I'm going to use something a little bit more natural here. I think I'll use the natural edge. I like that one. All right, so now when I draw, if I erase, it's going to be, a lot more. I'm drawing with pencil and a rubber eraser. Okay, so if you joined me for the last few classes, you remember about 3 classes back, we talked about this nice, simple skeletal thing you can draw. It's like an armature, I guess you call it, that I was showing you was borrowed from a great book by Andrew Loomis called Figure Drawing for All It's Worth. And it's a simplification of the figure down basically to a little oval for the head, which, by the way, I be careful with this. We talked about this, but drawing an oval for the head can be dangerous. If you don't get the proportions of that oval pretty nicely, which this one's fine, but if you're not careful and you wind up getting the wrong sort of shape, it's going to throw things off. So if you're not comfortable nailing that oval, if you haven't drawn it a lot of times, what you can do is draw a circle, okay, and draw a line down the middle, and then just give yourself sort of this little bucket off of that circle. And that's a better head shape to draw than, you know, some kind of oval that isn't quite right. All right, so just think about that if you want to use another method drawing that head. From the side, by the way, don't forget that the head has quite a bit of space traveling backwards. Right, here's that face mask here, right, that we're seeing. So this person is facing this way. There's that jaw coming down. Don't forget, there's a good bit of space back there for the back of your skull. And you don't want to wind up drawing heads that feel too narrow, that are missing the back of the skull. Okay, that's just something to be wary of. Now in this simple armature that we had, what we have is sort of a nice little shape here. Imagine it's like a piece of cloth draped over your shoulders and hangs down in front of the chest and over the back. And that just represents really the chest and shoulders, right? You're going to just kind of divide that up and say, oh yeah, there are my delts. Okay, and that's just really a simple way to think about the top half of the torso. Now what we did before was we threw in this oval shape, sort of egg shape, for the ribs, just so you know that they're there. And it's important to think about that rib cage. And we have the spine coming down, and we connect it to this kind of a shape, if you want to call it like a bow tie, or sort of like a yo-yo that's been crunched in on the bottom side, and deformed yo-yo there. And that's just really a nice, easy way to represent your pelvic floor there, the pelvis there, okay? You get the hip bones, you know. And out from there come those femurs, right? They're just kind of 1 and a 2, and a 1 and a 2, moving slightly inwards. And if you want to, you can do a little circle for the knees, doesn't matter. Then a little bit of a curve outward here, a little curve outward. And then down we go for the foot. And the foot is like this sort of wedge shape from the side. Don't forget, you got a heel back there, right? So don't draw it straight down, but it's kind of that kind of a shape. 3/4 view. Looks something like that, right? Connecting there to the leg. That's just an easy way to represent the figure there. Now what about the arms? Well, don't worry, those are just like a stick figure, right? Now right about there where the ribs end, okay, see this little area here? That's about where you want to knock in that elbow, okay? Remember, arms are a little longer than you think. A lot of people draw arms too short, okay? But they're not as short as you think. If you stand up, this is always a good exercise to do. Stand up, let your arms hang freely, and see about where they touch on your leg. You'll feel it about mid-thigh. And that's about the length you need to get that right. Okay. All right, so I'm going to just keep keeping this in the back of my mind, this sort of armature. Okay? It's just good for me to remember that in this space here, right here, okay? This is where all the soft, ooey gooey stuff is. This is what allows you to, you got all this muscle in here, and you got your internal organs there, but this soft area here, the abdominal muscles, right, is the area that is more flexible. The rib cage, of course, is pretty inflexible. This is bone at the top here and bone beneath it, but in the middle, it's just a nice bunch of soft, squishy stuff. Now you have the spine in the back there, but the spine is quite flexible. And so what's good to remember is that the top half of the torso, right here, this top section here, can move independently of this bottom section here. And that's how you get these nice twists and bends and subtle changes, as well as more extreme changes in your poses And so it doesn't make your figure feel so stiff if you've always got the hips facing the same direction as the chest. You want to avoid that because it doesn't feel lifelike. Okay, remember that's where a lot of the action happens right there. The pushing and pulling and twisting and turning and so on. All right. And of course, we know we've got a lot of flexibility here too in the neck, right? And so anyway, between moving the head up and down and left and right and tilting it and so on, and then twisting and turning the upper part of the torso and bending it and so on, that's where you can get a lot of good action. Now, you want to make sure that you don't take the rigid parts though in your drawing. So here and here. You don't want areas to bend that aren't meant to bend. Obviously, you would never bend in the middle of the femur, right? That would be weird. But people do it. You'd be surprised. They're not thinking about the underlying structure, the anatomy, what's going on with the skeletal structure, what's flexible and what's not, right? So keep that in mind. Alrighty. Okie dokie. Now, let's carry on here. So what I do is I think of a pose in my mind. I think of something. I could start with something very simple, like somebody sitting down perhaps, and maybe having one leg sort of crossed over the other. Now that might sound simple, but there's a lot to consider there. The next thing I might think about is, well, from which camera angle, so to speak, am I viewing this person who is seated? Where am I, the viewer? And this is where we get into things like perspective, which we talked about last week, and that can get pretty complicated depending on where your line of sight is, right? What if I were low to the figure and the figure was if I was maybe at like ankle height? Okay, so I'm here and the person's legs, start here and one foot is crossed over here. There's a foot coming towards me. And I have to think, oh my gosh, I've got to draw this person facing up away from me. So I'm going to see the bottom of their jaw here, right? Arm's going to come up and over that foot. Going to have to deal with foreshortening and all these kinds of things. This gets pretty complicated. Okay. Now what I'm thinking about here is the fact that if my line of sight is, say, here, if I were to just draw lines back to a vanishing point here, for example, I have to be keeping in mind that the only thing moving away from space that is higher than my line of sight is going to happen here underneath my horizon line, so to speak, my imaginary horizon line for this drawing. Okay? Got one hand resting on this knee. And I also have to keep in mind that somewhere out here, and this is the best thing to do, is line up like the shoulders and so on, because it's a nice straight line from one shoulder to the other shoulder in this situation here. Think about that line. That's going to travel all the way off my page and wind up hitting another vanishing point off in the distance, right? And so what I'm thinking about, like we talked about last week, if I can just complete this here, is drawing our figure more or less containing it sort of in a box, right? And thinking about it that way. Right, now the front of that box would actually be out here. Whoops. And then I'd be traveling back this way. So I'll just erase that away there. But by containing this in a box, it's easier for me to then work out my angles for where everything needs to sit, okay? Especially if I have to draw a chair that they're sitting on. This is all going to be the underside of the chair here. There's part of the back of the chair showing there. One leg there, one leg there. We'll have a little curve back there like so. But yeah, there's a lot to think about there, right? So depending on how you can make your job easy, you can make your job hard. You know, by deciding to have my vantage point lower, right? I'm making a little bit more work for myself. But it's all manageable when you use these tricks. Okay? I know there's going to be some foreshortening going on. I know that I need to enlarge the areas that are coming closer to me. So like this leg here and this leg and this foot is going to be a lot larger than I would expect it to be. It's probably going to be about the same size as the head, if not slightly larger than that even. Now I'll knock this back a little bit. And let's see what we can do with it. I'll go ahead and size my brush down a bit so I can be a bit more precise. There we go. Now I know I'm just drawing a bald head here. Don't worry about that. That's just to keep things simple. All those kinds of details like hair and the distinct build of this person, that can all happen later. But if you remember, what we looked at was using these simple shapes like cones and cylinders, right, and things like that to work out. There's that nice part of the armature there. It contains a shoulder. And come down here. And for the hand, I'm literally just drawing like two sort of thin rectangles, one for the bottom part of the hand and one for the fingers, right? So I can just separating it like this. Here's one section from the fingers down to the base of the palm, and then the fingers are another section. And that just helps me at this stage to really keep things simple. There's one foot there. A little tube right there. Now when I look at it, I say, oh, I realize I should probably move the leg up in front of that foot and get that foot a little higher. So that's easy to do because I'm not doing, don't make the mistake of drawing a lot of detail at this stage, right? Give yourself flexibility, room to adjust things as needed. Okay, that's important at this stage. So get that leg a little higher up here. Think about that other leg, which is coming towards me here. Come in, I've got my hip there. This other leg coming out towards me here. And this is what I'm going to be dealing with that foot. Look how big that gets with all that foreshortening. See that? Alrighty. Now I can get that foot up here. See, all right, that feels better. I'm going to see the underside of the chair here, so I will not see the underside of that leg. And notice how I'm using this line here which is heading back to that vanishing point, to help me line up the chair legs there. Right. There we go. And then I would be traveling back in this direction towards that vanishing point we can't see that's off the page, to get my other front leg of the chair in place right there. And then traveling back this way here to get that other leg in position, which is falls behind the leg. So believe it or not, you actually would not see it, at least not in the perspective I've chosen to draw here. Alrighty, now we move from this point here. Why don't we just put a little center line in there for that brow ridge where the eyes are going to fall under. Now, why is that closer to the top of the head than to the jaw? We always are told that the eyes appear mostly in the center of the head. Well, don't forget, we're looking up, right? We're looking up at this head. So that's an important consideration. We have to move that eye line up because we're drawing it in perspective. All right, now we'll take our original drawing and hide that. And then we can knock this back. And you see we've made good progress now in drawing this figure, okay? And the next step would be for me to then decide, okay, now I want to add a bit more character to this person. What are they going to look like? Are they male or female, right? What kind of a body type are we talking about here? And things along those lines, right? All those sorts of considerations now I can start to think about, because I have the basic figure in place in a pretty believable perspective. I mean, as I look at it, I see some issues with the chair. I would probably have, I would adjust how much of the bottom of the chair is showing and add some more thickness to it, you know, things like that. But generally speaking, I've got a pretty good sketch here to work from. There we go. Just adjust the sketch if I want. I mean, we are working digitally, so it's fun to just erase, additive, subtractive. Keep it bouncing back and forth, right? All right, now this person could be very muscular. They could be really skinny mini, who knows? But this very general figure that I've drawn here now, I can take in any direction I want. So let's say I want to just do a bit more detail here. So I just do this. Make my brush a little bit smaller. That gives me a bit more control. Why do I work with these bigger brushes at this stage? Anybody know the reason for that? Well, I'll tell you. It prevents me from getting too bogged down in details too early on that do not matter. Details that do not matter, okay? If I were to start with really small brushes, well, I'd start making really small lines and I'd start worrying about things I shouldn't be worried about at a stage in the drawing where I'm just trying to get proportion down, right? Things like that. There we go. Uh-oh, here we go. Had the little spinning wheel there for a moment. I tell you, ever since I upgraded to, what is it called, Big Sur, or whatever the latest OS is, some weird things happen. I get stuff, I'll get that rainbow wheel happening all the time. And I'll get this funky thing where it'll say pasting from iPad. I have no idea what that means. What's it pasting from my iPad? It'll say that all the time. And then I won't see anything change. I won't see any evidence that something happened. So, if anybody knows what that's about, let me know. So you can see here, getting a little bit more specific, right? With this person, whoever they are. Actually, I think I'll do this. I'll have the pants just kind of like bunch up here. Over some cool boots. How about that? Why not? That's something I've never really owned, is a cool pair of boots, like big clumpy boots that look like they could really do some damage. Never had a pair of cool boots. When I was in high school, the cool boots were these Doc Marten boots that were, yeah, like the cool kids were wearing them. I was not one of the cool kids. That was not me. Plus, they were expensive, man. I wasn't gonna pay money for that stuff. Need to buy art supplies, right? That's not very convincing, is it? Let's undo that and go back to thinking about the simple shapes there. So I've got this. First, let's get the other part of the leg drawn. So the top of the boot, right there, no issues there. We're gonna come this way. Get that other hand roughly placed. So we understand what's going on there. And we're gonna have that leg right there, okay? We gotta change that knee, because as I think about it, that its origin point is there, so this is kind of where that would need to be coming from, right there. See, this is the good thing about having these little preliminary steps worked out. So when you get to this point, it's not that big a deal. You need to change something up a little bit to make it work, right? That's a little better. But again, this is sort of a middle step where you're still not really at the point where you want to be making final decisions. Now you're just kind of working out who this person is, a little bit about their build, maybe their wardrobe here, right? Oops. Alrighty. So I hope watching me go through this process is helpful for you all, and you're thinking about how you could apply some of this to your own stuff. If you feel like you're rushing to get to a point where you're just like, well, I really want to just draw that person. I just want to draw it. Well, hold your horses and see what is it that is making your job harder. If you think it takes it's longer to do it this way, to work these things out, well, most of the time it's not. It actually saves you time to go through some kind of a process like this. And you'd be surprised. I think it could really benefit a lot of folks to just try this and see what happens. You don't have to, but and you know, do I do this every time I draw a figure? Well, no, but I'm doing this to demonstrate how you can get from a blank page to something that looks fairly well proportioned and so on. And I mean, I did make a decision early in this drawing, obviously right on the outset, to choose a perspective that was not the easiest. So, you know, that's what I decided to do. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Still not happy with the angle of that chair. I can see that it's just not quite right, but you know what? It's going to be okay for now. I think we're going to be okay with that. All right, let's go ahead and turn off that bit right there. And let's look at that person. All right, so that's okay, right? What would you do next? You know, now you could, again, this is the thing, you can just keep doing this, right? You can keep doing this. You can just knock it back, knock it back, knock it back. Maybe you feel like, okay, I'm ready now to use some inks on this. So, you know, there's that Belgian Comics inker right there. It's a nice one. And maybe just like you want to keep it simple and you just do some simple lines. Maybe that's the style you're working in for this piece you're doing, whatever it is. Maybe it's part of a series. But I tell you, this wouldn't be very easy for me to do if I hadn't gone to the trouble of those first bits here, right? What are the odds that I'd be able to just knock something out that had the right proportions from this angle? Slim to none, I would say. Well, I'm not Kim Jung-ji, however you say his name. He would be able to just be like, oh, yeah, I'll just draw that, you know, perfectly. For the rest of us mere mortals, why not give yourself a little advantage and give yourself a process, a method, a formula that you can rely on to keep things somewhat consistent, you know? Whoops, that doesn't make any sense. There we go. If you watch most people do this kind of thing, they're all going to have some kind of method they rely on that will allow them to do things more than just once. It's like you can't just get lucky one time and do an okay drawing and then fail the next 10 times. You know, if you're trying to be making any money at this, trying to be a commercial artist of any kind, you know, this is obviously what I just did there is wrong. This should be coming back that way, but you know what? When in doubt, just black it out. There. If I'm having trouble with something, sometimes I'm like, hey, there's a good spot for just a nice chunky black section of the drawing where I don't have to worry about like getting it exactly right. Might want that to be the case all the way throughout. You say, yeah, you know what? I can use black to help define a lot more of this drawing here. And you know, maybe you're doing a comic or something and you need to get this pose looking right. You don't have reference for it. Time is tight and you say, what am I going to do? Instead of struggling with it and drawing it a bunch of times without giving yourself something to start with that makes sense, right? Don't do that. Why make your job that much more difficult? Drawing's hard already, isn't it? It's kind of challenging to draw something. Why don't you make your job a little easier and make that work for yourselves? That's what I say. Don't make your job so hard. Alrighty, so let's take a look now without the sketch. So there you go, a little inking job. Looks decent. Yeah, I'd still go in and mess with this a bunch. But for today, just to show how that process works, I hope that's helpful. Alrighty, now let's go back to our nice vine charcoal brush there. And let's try something a little bit more dynamic. All right, so maybe somebody who is running towards us, let's say. All right, now, this time I'm gonna just say, okay, I want the head down. It was similar to like what I was drawing when I started today and just was messing around, getting warmed up. The head down, this person's a bit sprinting, right? This arm is back. Now, so I'll show the shoulder there with a circle so you can see this. Behind that shoulder is the forearm and the elbow, but we can't see those because of foreshortening. So that shoulder's behind us. Sorry, the shoulder's behind, or in front of rather, the entire upper arm. We just see that lower part of the arm. That's visible. Right, so there's that whole section, some foreshortening going on. Thinking about our armature there, this is wrapping around here. I see lots of folks are hi, that's just Cody. Hi, Cody. On YouTube. I'm sorry, I'm not checking the chat on YouTube. But chat's quiet over here on Behance, so that's fine. Now, what do I want this other arm to be doing? Well, I could have this hand coming towards me, so just represent that with a little sort of circle. And then have go. This whole arm is just really kind of one big shape like this, but it's broken into a hand coming towards us, the forearm behind that, and then a lot of the rest of the arm is behind all that, which is the upper part of the arm, right? All right, now, where are those hips? There's one right there. And the other one right there. Coming in towards each other, forming that nice like basket shape down there. Right? And we're gonna have one leg coming out towards us, have that knee out there. Thinking about that femur coming towards us like that, right? All the muscle around it, surrounding it. So foreshortening there, we know that the upper leg is longer than that. If we were to extend it, it would be down like this, right? And there's the knee. But that's not what we're doing. We're bringing it towards us. And then coming back this way. Another simple shape there. Breaking that lower leg into two sections, like the calf and then everything underneath. All right, now what do we do with that other leg? Notice, by the way, this is important. I pointed this out in another class recently that when you're running or walking, your left leg will do whatever your right arm is doing and vice versa. If your right arm is moving forward, your left leg will be moving forward. It's not the same side of your body doing the same thing at the same time. It's the opposite. So a lot of people make that mistake and things look really unnatural when they're drawing them. But just try walking or running, see what your arms and legs do, and then that's what you do. You draw them that way. Okay? Going back and back. And this foot is planted on the ground, right? But further away from the viewer. So this foot is here in front of us, and that foot's way back there, planted on the ground. You know, the person's sprinting. I think just to make the drawing more interesting, what I would do is I would bend this leg more, like that, and have that foot like that. I just think that's better. Just makes it a better drawing, you know. You can always adjust these things. Nobody is saying you must absolutely draw that foot right there, right? As long as the range of motion is believable, like you're not doing something that the body just can't do, yeah, you're in good shape. You're okay. All right, now this is something again where I could knock it back. And I'll go ahead and, there we go, grab that. I'm skipping a step here today for this second drawing because we are going to be out of time. I don't want us to run out of time before I do an okay job of making this drawing look kind of finished. All right, there we go. I always have a tough time with like getting the folds to feel like what they should feel like. With this kind of thing. If I'm rushing, I'm not gonna usually be quite as accurate as I should be. But you know, under normal circumstances, I'm not going to be in that much of a hurry. But I do want to finish this for y'all, make it look like a decent drawing, so. There is our figure running towards us. And it's fine. It's no masterpiece, but we got some energy there. We got this idea that the anatomy makes sense, right? Foreshortening makes sense, more or less. I'm pleased with it. It works for me, you know. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you found some of this useful. I hope that some of these things I did today will help you with your own drawings, with your own figure drawings. With if there's just one thing I said that maybe you take away from it and go, oh, hey, I never thought about that, or whatever, then I'm happy. That's all I can do. That's all I can hope for. Right? So we'll do more of these in the new year. I like what I just did there. And I'll see you all then. Everybody, please make sure to take care of yourselves. Stay healthy if you can. And take care of your friends and family. I want to show you something cute that my good buddy Coy got for me. Look at this. He got me for a little present, a little Bob Ross Lego. Right? How you gonna beat that? Thank you, Koi. I love this little guy. He sits back there on the shelf. He's got his own little easel too and some paint tubes. So it's the little things, gang, that make me happy. Anyway, I'll see you in the new year. Happy holidays, everybody. Take care of yourselves, and ciao for now.